Hello, and welcome to Whisked, Stirring Up Conversations in the Shared Kitchen Industry, a monthly series where we sit down with the operators, partners, and food system leaders shaping the shared kitchen world. I'm Tyler, Director of Special Projects at the Food Corridor, the leading management software for shared kitchens. Through our department, Kitchen EDU, we support shared kitchens with tools, education, and resources to help them operate sustainably and grow with intention. Each month, we're digging into real conversations about what's working, what's challenging, and what shared kitchen operators need to know to better support the food businesses they serve. Today, I'm excited to be joined by Erik from Magnolia Fund. We'll be discussing the innovative crowdfunding campaign that helped launch Buck Street Kitchen. Thank you for joining us today, Erik. Can you start by introducing yourself and a little bit about what Magnolia Fund is and what the goals that you all have are?
Sure. My name is Erik Ibarra. I'm from Houston, Texas. We started Magnolia Fund as a way of owning more of our neighborhood. And in that process, we discovered this amazing thing that is shared kitchens. And we built conviction really for the shared kitchen after we'd already started the fund. And so, in many ways, Magnolia Fund is this, I would say, funding mechanism for Ox Street Kitchen, the kitchen that we invested in. And today we are about 2 months. Sorry, we're about 4 months into operating the kitchen, and Magnolia Fund is really there to allow people from the neighborhood or people who care about place-based investing to participate in the economic development that's happening right in their own backyard.
Awesome. Thank you. So tell us a little bit more about the community that Magnolia Fund is rooted in.
Yeah, so Magnolia Fund actually gets its name from a neighborhood in the East End or the east side of Houston called Magnolia Park. And it has a long history. It's actually an older part of Houston than the city itself. There was a town of Harrisburg in the East End that was, predates Houston. But over the years, of course, it got gobbled up by the city and is now part of Houston. So the community actually really dates back to the early 1900s. You have a lot of Mexican American immigrants and you have a lot of industry that started to be built. So we have the port here in Houston, and then you have healthcare. We have NASA. We have a lot of things going on in Houston, but in the East End specifically, it really served as a neighborhood that fueled the job growth for the port, as well as just really the infrastructure that built the city. Our warehouse district and a lot of our industrial commercial spaces are in the East End historically. And so that community over the last 100 years, a lot of blue collar jobs, a lot of folks that are of Mexican American immigrant descent. And so that community today, while it was at some point in the 80s to 90s, as much as 90% Latino, now is closer to 50%. And so it's experiencing a lot of gentrification, a lot of transition, and that community is really still trying to hold on to a lot of its culture. And so we think at Magnolia Fund, by investing in real estate and investing in actual assets in the neighborhood, we can own more of the neighborhood, still retaining a little bit of that culture. So that's kind of the goal there.
Awesome. So that kind of leads a little bit into my next question, where most shared kitchens we see are privately owned or operated by nonprofits. What was the moment that made you feel like this was the right structure for this particular shared kitchen in this community to do a community owned fund?
Yeah, from the start, our fund was really a couple of local investors that I happen to know personally. And I say a couple, like less than 10. And we put together this idea that maybe we could pool our money, and our real investment is in the larger community. What's kind of, I guess, kind of funny about our investment fund and just funding in general is if you want to do a crowdfunding campaign, it's kind of like you better have a little bit of seed money to get started because it's not easy, it's not cheap. And so what I told a lot of our earliest investors was, I need you to write a big check so that people from the neighborhood can write a small check. And that actually touched a lot of our investors because they realized that, oh yeah, like I may have been focused on my career and I had the wherewithal to write a large check, but my tia, my aunt, my grandpa, they don't. And we'd love to kind of bring the rest of the neighborhood with us. And so that was kind of that was kind of the idea there.
I love that. How did you start to get the residents to start thinking themselves of investors in this concept versus just neighbors or patrons of the businesses in the kitchen?
I think that was one of the biggest challenges because I think most people look at a neighborhood that's in transition, especially an underserved or undercapitalized neighborhood, as if we're doing something unique and cool in the neighborhood and it's helping people, we must be a nonprofit and it must not be something that I can actually see a return from. It's just something that maybe I could donate to or I could volunteer for. And what we had to kind of constantly remind people of is like, no, there's people building new things in the neighborhood and many of them are doing it because there's a return involved. We should be no different. If it's true this neighborhood is going to see all this economic prosperity, why shouldn't people that have been in the neighborhood for decades, why shouldn't we be the ones leading this, not just participating, but leading this? And so it's still a constant thing. Our fund is still open. And so we're doing things to talk to people, educate people, answering DMs, whatever we can to make people understand that this is something they can actually be a part of financially. And I think education is always going to be a part of our mission.
Yeah, definitely. What is the mix of people investing? Do you have a large percentage of folks from the community investing as compared to, like your normal run of the mill investors? Where are you finding these folks?
Yeah, it's interesting. My first sort of lesson with the idea of the crowdfunding and sort of lessons learned, if you will, you're really bringing your community to these crowdfunding platforms. And so being able to find investors from those platforms, you will get a few, but it's few and far between. It's really, you can think of it as just sort of your scoreboard, and you're the one that has to bring the game, if you will. But where we originally started and started thinking about, okay, how do we get people to know more about what we're doing? We knew that we wanted to do a shared kitchen. And so we wanted to support mostly pop up food vendors that we started seeing in the neighborhood. And so, what better way to highlight a pop up food vendor for us was to combine that with a movie night. So, we started doing pop up movie nights. And through that process, we started meeting a lot of food vendors and we were trying to figure out who we wanted to be at our pop up movie night. And so we were kind of doing two things. We were building this sort of community of food makers, but then also we were trying to get people from the neighborhood to come out, watch a movie, captive audience. At the beginning of the movie, we get to talk about the fund. At the end of the movie, we say, hey, here's what we got going on. Join our fund. And so that's kind of where we started. And then, of course, that's one half of sort of our engagement. The other half would probably be social media and having a presence online. And we did see a lot of comments and a lot of engagement through our social media as well. But nothing beats one-on-one interactions, real person interactions.
Yeah, crowdfunding takes like consistent public communication and interaction over a long period of time. And it sounds like you all kept the community pretty engaged. What did you learn about keeping that momentum going while the campaign isn't brand new anymore, but it's still going on?
It's funny you say that because we're actually in, I want to say day 9 of 60, where this is our final stretch of the fund and it literally closes in a couple of weeks. And it's funny you say brand new because I think what you, as an entrepreneur and as someone doing something, any new endeavor, it's almost like you have to keep it new. You have to keep reintroducing yourself because there are constantly, especially with social media, there are brand new people engaging with your content. And if you feel like it's only your followers, you're just going to keep speaking to your followers. You may be forgetting that there are new people there. And so I encourage anyone who's thinking about doing this, constantly reintroduce yourself. And it's a way of keeping it fresh and giving yourself fresh eyes to think, okay, there's someone I may have been posting for the 100th time today, but someone has seen our content for the first time today. And so, how would you speak to them? And so, I think that's my best advice there.
Yeah. So for a shared kitchen operator or developer thinking about bringing this type of community funding model to their community, what's one thing that they need to understand most before starting?
I really think building a community, a roster, if you will, of potential members. Because while we were doing pop up movie nights or engaging on social media, the entire time we had a survey on our website. It said, hey, if you're going to use a shared kitchen in the East End, what should it look like? What kind of equipment do you want to see in there? What do you do today? How busy are you? All kinds of questions. And in fact, there were so many questions that we put in there that I was a little afraid that no one would answer. And over probably a year stretch, we got about 30 to 40 responses. I was happy with that because a lot of them were very informative. And so that's number one, not just a survey, but engaging folks and to understand what their needs are. And then being able to assess the community. Are there strengths in the community from food makers where you could see them utilizing this? And are you engaging with them to understand where they are in their journey as a food maker, as a food entrepreneur, to where a commercial kitchen would in fact help them, then it's probably a positive indicator that doing something in the food space in the commercial kitchen shared space would be beneficial in that community.
Was there anything surprising that came out of that community surveying or something that you didn't expect to learn?
There's probably a lot. I think some of the most surprising things, or I would say one of the most surprising things, is that I didn't realize that I think this is after we really decided that we would do a shared kitchen. I undervalued the need for mentorship and guidance. And I thought of it as a little transactional, to be completely honest. I thought, well, people need this space legally, they have to have this space. And so, of course, we're going to solve this problem for them. But as we started speaking to food makers, and as I really started pushing them and asking them about what are their goals, what are their challenges, invariably I thought, man, if only you could talk to somebody who's been there. And sometimes they would bring it up. They'd say, oh, I need this or that, and I don't know how to do this. And I thought, well, I know a guy who's pretty successful in CPG. Let me connect you. And when you make those connections, that was the biggest surprise. I realized they just needed that little bit of information, whether they were trying to validate something or they were just completely lost and didn't know what to do next. Mentorship and having that community is key for a lot of our food makers. So I think that was one of the most surprising things for us.
So, were there any common themes that were coming up where folks needed the most mentorship in or areas of business where was overall lacking with majority of food entrepreneurs?
Yeah. So I think it deals a little bit with workflow.
Mm.
And at the same time, you got to think of it from a food maker perspective. If you are just getting into taking this next step of commercializing your business at this level, then you're getting into a new space, whether you have the money to buy your own space or rent your own space, or you're using a shared kitchen. You now have to figure out, well, how am I going to plan my workflow in the kitchen? And now I'm planning my workflow maybe around people or around limited resources. We only have 3 sheet pan racks and we thought that was enough. Maybe we need 2 more. And so the food makers are trying to balance this new space with their new workflow with optimizing their business. And so I think that at least for us and with our food makers, we have 9 food makers all doing all kinds of different things, but they have to figure out their workflow within our kitchen and with our sort of variables and how we book or how we manage the spaces.
Yeah. So I want to talk a little bit more about how Ox Street Kitchen operates. And do you see a way or a change in how operations are run with this community ownership? Are there makers who are investors in the kitchen?
Yeah, so it's interesting. I think first off, there are one or two food makers that are investors. One has joined and one has not, which is interesting. But I think that and I talk to them regularly. One has said, hey, we're just got some other things we're trying to do. We've actually been pretty busy, food maker from home, probably cottage industry, and looking to join, as soon as possible. But in terms of, I would say, managing the food makers and really just in terms of control and operations, it's interesting. Most people think of, my uncle used to tell me this, like, you got to own 51%. So you have control over the business. And I always thought that was just the truth. And, I've been in tech for 25 years. And in many respects, that is correct. But when you have a kitchen like this, you can't really just wait around for consensus. You can't wait for something to be voted on. So you have to have a way for operationally someone to make decisions. And so Magnolia Fund has this structure where we might have 100 investors and really nobody owns a super majority of anything, or no individual owns a super majority, but all control of the business is done by one entity, and that's myself and a group of advisors. The advisors rely on me to make day-to-day decisions operationally. If there's ever anything big that we need to vote on, we will. But on a day-to-day, it just needs to get done, and it's pretty straightforward. We had a lot of help. Food Corridor was beneficial in helping us with an operations manual. We invested in that. But then we also hired locally for folks that were savvy in the commercial kitchen space or in the restaurant industry. They helped us understand our compliance needs and a lot of operational efficiencies that we could install in the kitchen early on. And we still utilize them today as mentors, but for the most part, being able to, I think, manage members is something that is always going to be an ongoing process. And so we do a lot to communicate. Just this weekend, I saw a mop bucket that was just left out. So putting together a Slack message to let everybody know, like, hey, this can't happen. Obviously, we want to make sure everybody, it walks into a clean, welcoming environment. So it's a lot of education, a lot of management, but it is definitely something that is manageable for us. And I think it's just super interesting as we're learning the process and learning how to keep up with all things that are required for a commercial kitchen.
Yeah, it's definitely a lot of moving parts,
Hmm.
especially coming from a tech background. What was the biggest learning curve that you experienced opening a shared kitchen?
Yeah, I think, the biggest learning curve probably for us was the difference between policy and procedure and enforcement and education. Right. And so you could have a rule on the wall, even posted that, hey, we don't leave the mop bucket out. Right. But until you set that expectation during an onboarding session, or you reinforce it when you're actually see it happen, that's really for us. I think the light bulb moment was, more setting expectation is going to be the key. Yes, we got to have policies in place, and of course, maybe even penalties if somebody, is consistent in leaving the mop bucket out or something. But really, it's about setting expectations and having clear communication with people ongoing. And so, I think it was just a realization that that is where we should double down our efforts and making sure we communicate and set expectations. And so, good learnings.
Yeah. That seems to be a constant across all operations.
I bet. Yeah.
So you had your community really rally around this fund and garner excitement around what you all were doing with Ox Street. Have you seen that carry through with ordering catering and booking them for events and sort of enthusiasm for supporting the food businesses once you all opened?
And so I think what's interesting is the food makers that came on board, some of them were with us from the very beginning, in the sense that they were very interested in starting with us from the very beginning. And some of them just totally brand new. And so we actually we've made it a point to, again, reintroduce ourselves. And so when a new food maker hits our door, there's a couple of things that we jump on a phone call with them. We're happy to do a tour with them. And then from an information perspective, almost from a mission perspective, there's two super important things that we talk about. One, this kitchen was funded by a fund that is homegrown grassroots from the neighborhood. And then two, if I can share a little bit about the naming of our kitchen, one of our first investors was a buddy of mine. His name, Marcelo Garcia III. We called him Ox ever since we were kids. We grew up in the neighborhood together. He became a firefighter about 10 years ago. And unfortunately, in 2024, he passed. And this was in the line of duty. And so, our friend group and people from the neighborhood, we always referred to him as Ox. And he was such a guiding force in the neighborhood. He was so giving. I mean, he literally was the first check into our fund. But what's super special, and this is to my point, I always tell every food member when I first meet them or when they first do a tour, I want them to know how important the business is to us as a neighborhood and to us as people that manage this fund. And so, what's crazy about the kitchen is that about 4 months after we passed is when we actually found this property that we're in. And so, even though we knew when Ox was still alive, we knew we were investing in a commercial kitchen. We hadn't yet found the property. When we found it, and the week that we went under contract, I looked up the name of the street that it was on. I just got curious, and it's a funny name called Dwinnell. And so I figured it's probably some family name from Houston. I looked it up, and it turns out it's an old Gaelic word. It's an old Irish word, and it actually means ox. And yeah, my jaw
You're
dropped.
fine.
And I'm telling you, Ox's sister is also an investor in the fund. And I screenshotted what I had just Googled and I sent it to her, and she was just thrilled. And so we took that as a little sign from the universe that we're on the right path. We still did all of our due diligence and made sure that this is the right property for us. But then when it came time to name the space, we actually put a little bit of a exercise together, and we allowed the community to submit names. And with his sister and myself, we submitted Ox Street Kitchen because in a way, Dwinnell Street is Ox Street. And so it got overwhelmingly all the votes. And so that's how we have the name Ox Street Kitchen. And I tell every food maker so that they understand how ingrained and how important this space is to us in the neighborhood.
Wow, that's incredible.
Right.
What a
Thank
story.
you. Yeah,
Wow.
for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it's just meant to be.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, you can't get any more ingrained in the community and than that at all.
Yeah.
You offered founding membership rates with, locked in for founding members and early booking
Mhm.
access. How did that program perform, and what did it tell you about the demand in the community for people wanting to use the kitchen?
Yeah. I love that question because I think it's an excellent opportunity to show where we learned a few things. And so, number one, the cost to the cost for our membership was sort of the second or third thing in terms of priority on for top of mind for our food makers. They were really thinking about, how many hours they were going to spend in the kitchen. And yes, they want to save that money, but they're also thinking from an order of operations. This is my busy season. I'm going to just keep doing what I'm doing, and then I'm going to join later. Our timeline is not necessarily their timeline, right? And so being able to say, hey, if you sign up before this date, I think it's helpful for those who need a little motivation, sure. But I think what we ended up doing, and really this is probably something we'll publish on our website soon, is we published an order of operations for going from I'm not in a shared kitchen to I'm now in a shared kitchen. And what are the steps you need to take, not just with us as a kitchen, but with the city's health department, the state of Texas to get your tax ID or your tax permits, sales tax permit, all these little things that in the first couple of food makers, we realized this is the important things that they're focused on. And so while we did still offer an introductory offer for those food makers, once we went up on our first membership by like $50. We really didn't see a huge difference in who was signing up or the motivation for signing up. But once we put that order of operations together, and once we hand that over to a food maker, we did see a decrease in the amount of time it takes for them to make a decision. They can see the process, they see the light at the end of the tunnel. They can make a decision with us quicker and say, all right, I'm ready to sign up because I see it's order of operations number one. I need to sign my agreement with you. Then I can contact the city. So I see that I'm being held up unless I have this established contract with you. So that was super helpful. And I think if the ultimate goal of our promotion was to get people to sign up quickly, what we realized is actually we want to get people to make a decision quickly, and giving them the most information about the entire process will help them do that.
Mhm. Yep. That's another common thread we hear from our
I
operators.
bet.
They're just not kitchen ready, or they don't understand what it takes, or county regulators are too hard to navigate, and this, that, and the other. So
Mhm.
that's a really great thing that y'all recognized early on in the process.
For sure.
That's amazing. So for your members, few years down the line, what does success look like for them? Do you have infrastructure or plans for them to grow their business within? Does graduation look like success for them? Look into the future. What does that look like for your food businesses?
I think this is the best question for us because we are this fund that is saying we believe the neighborhood is only going to become more prosperous. There's only going to be more economic development in the neighborhood. And how can we be a part of it? How can we lead it? So we started asking ourselves this very question really a couple of months ago, and started thinking, okay, well, if we're successful in the kitchen, that must mean our food makers are successful. And we've brought on a considerable amount of food makers, but what does success look like for our food makers? So we actually started asking them their goals. What are your goals in the next 6 months to a year? What are your goals in the next 5 years? And invariably, it's to be on store shelves, to have their own brick and mortar, and to grow their catering business. And so we thought, okay, if our food makers are going to be successful, they're actually going to leave us, which needs to be built into the program. And if it is, then how are we, maybe if they want to be on store shelves, how can we provide a space that can be conducive to that? If they want their own brick and mortar, could we be their landlord at the next stage? And if they're trying to compete and win contracts for catering, could we be a venue that can make that happen? And so the next phase of our fund is looking at another space that won't necessarily be another commercial kitchen, but would be that next stepping stone for our food makers that are successful and that want to graduate into a new space or that want to be part of big events. So still forthcoming, still working out where we might end up for our next fund and what, that might look like. But that's where our mind is. And that's where we're thinking about, because it's true. If we're successful, it's because they're successful, and success for them means that they're actually leaving us, which is okay with us. And we have to account for that.
Yeah, definitely. And I love that you all are thinking about that now, and because you position Magnolia Fund as a real estate investment company, right? And making
Mhm.
sure that ownership in the community stays in the community and doesn't get taken over by gentrification and people coming from other areas, and really making sure the
Yep.
community reflects those who are living there. And
Mhm.
that's exciting to hear that you could be building that real estate infrastructure as the next fund for your food makers and have this all kind of work together. I love that.
Appreciate
So
that. Yeah.
yeah. Are there plans or talks for Magnolia Fund to stay rooted in the East End or expand into other areas?
I think, yeah, to be quite honest, a lot of other neighborhoods in Houston have asked, or have said things on social media like, oh, we need this in the north side, or we need this in this part of town. And I think want to build capacity at some point to be able to help others. And I think really, just like the kitchen has an operations manual, I think we're slowly writing an operations manual for this kind of community rooted growth, economic development. It's going to be a process, and we don't by no means have it all figured out, but we're willing to lend a hand and some expertise to anyone that would like to do this, because I think along the way there's been so many learning lessons that if we were to do it all over again, we would hope there was somebody that had kind of been there before to help us. So we'd love to be that for other people. Today, of course, we're always going to be focused in the East End with Magnolia Fund, but in the future, it would be great to be able to do more and to be able to give other communities the tools that we had to build from the ground up to make it happen. So, yeah, I think in the future, maybe for sure.
Yep. And a final question. There is one thing you'd want the shared kitchen industry to take away from what you're building here. What is it?
That's great. I think one big takeaway for the shared kitchen industry, I think would be that the old models or the status quo of how we fund things, I think still has some innovation left to be seen. And we definitely took money from 100% locals. I would say 99% locals. There's some people that found us from WeFunder that are across the country, but really there's no bank debt. There was no debt at all, and no outside funding, no VC money, right? Being able to build a shared kitchen through the investment of locals is the thing. And I really think we're going to see more of it. If, if I'm being honest, I think really we're just at the start of what I think more local economies are realizing is that if we fund our own things and we own our own things, we can keep dollars local. And that's actually very powerful for our community. And so that's what my hope is. And I think that's what we're going to continue to see. And so that's probably my best takeaway for the shared kitchen industry.
Awesome. Thank you. And you said the fund is still open. The campaign is open for another
Hmm.
couple of weeks. Do you want to plug anything about that in case anyone is interested?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So Magnolia Fund, which is the funding mechanism for Ox Street Kitchen, is still open. It's on WeFunder.com. You just type in Magnolia, you'll see Magnolia Fund at the top. Click on that. You can read about our entire offering. Every campaign on WeFunder has to disclose financials and all this important information. Read through it, check it out. Before you invest, you can ask us any questions on that platform or any of the social media platforms. And yeah, people can invest for as little as $100. There's a return model. It's all on there, but it is, again, our way of doing economic development that our neighborhood can be proud of, but you don't have to be from the neighborhood to be part of it. So hope people join.
Awesome. And we'll include that link in the show notes as well so people can
Awesome.
directly access it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Eric, for taking the time to talk today and share your story. And we're excited to follow the journey of Ox Street and see what Magnolia Fund does next.
Awesome. Thank you very much for having us.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of Whisked. A huge thank you to Eric for sharing his experience and story. You can learn more about the food corridor and how our app supports shared kitchen management at thefoodcorridor.com. Book a demo with one of our sales representatives to see how we can help you get out of the office and focused on growth. Explore our sister site, The Kitchen Door, to connect with qualified food business leads in your area. For more learning opportunities, be sure to check out kitchenedu.com, our educational hub designed specifically for shared kitchen operators and the businesses they support. Until next time, thanks for being part of the shared kitchen community.